I know we, and by we I do mostly mean me, spent the last year neck deep in US election coverage. But it's super important to understand that the Australian electoral system operates in a fundamentally different way. And probably the biggest distinction is that in Australia, we have preferential voting.
It's Voting 101 for 2025 with Matilda Boseley from The Guardian, Australia.
To understand preferential voting, it's probably easiest to compare it to the system that the US and the UK use, which is called first past the post. In first past the post elections, you cast your vote for the single candidate you want to win. Then whoever gets the most votes gets elected. Pretty simple. But here's the catch. Let's say there was an election where the biggest issue is which sporting event the government should fund. Of the 3 candidates, 2 of them want to host a tennis Grand Slam, and then the other is dead set on a Grand Prix. Now, the voting pool, the citizens, are mostly tennis lovers, but oh no, wait, their votes have been split, and the petrol head gets elected. But now let's look at that situation with a preferential system. Here, you don't just tick a box, you write numbers next to each candidate's name in order of who you most want to win. You're numbering your preferences, if you will. The first round of voting in this system looks pretty much the same. Everyone's grouped next to the candidate they put first. But no one has the majority yet. No one has more than 50%. The raconteurs have the fewest votes, so let's take them out of the running, and all of their voters will have their number 2 preferences counted instead. Naturally, a lot of those votes flow to the tennis tragics, who now have more than 50% and win that seat. And the will of the people is better represented. Unfortunately. In a real election, there'd be way more candidates and way more rounds of votes being redistributed. But the really interesting thing about preferential voting is that it essentially removes any risk of your vote for a minor party or independent candidate just vanishing into thin air. Because no matter how many times your ballot gets moved, it will always go to someone. Even if the battle comes down to the candidates you put last and second last, you still get a say on which of them you would prefer to represent you in Parliament, and your vote still counts for just as much. Now, let's chat about some real-world tactics for ensuring your ballot does exactly what you want it to do. Seeing as Labor and the Liberal National Coalition are the most dominant parties, most votes in lower house electorates will eventually come down to a battle between the 2 of them. If either of these guys are your favourite, your decision is easy. Simply grab your green lower house ballot and put a 1 next to their candidate. Then fill out all the other boxes in order of your preference. But if you want to vote for a small party or an independent, but do still have a preference on if you would prefer a Labor government or a Liberal national government, just put your actual first choice first, then make sure you eventually put your preferred big boy party ahead of the other. It gets a little more complicated when it comes to the white upper house ballot, and we'll explain all of that in a later video. But just before you go, when you do get to the polling booth, there's going to be a bunch of volunteers from all different parties handing you how to vote leaflets that tell you the order they would like you to put your preferences in. And just so you know, you absolutely do not have to follow these recommendations. But if you really like that candidate or party, sticking to their order does tend to help them the most. Plus, there's usually at least 1 or 2 random names that you've never heard of before on the ballot, and those sheets can help you with some super last-minute research.